Hey everybody, welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. I'm your host Trevor.
And I'm Vincent.
And today we're going to be talking about the latest Viagra Boys record, Welfare Jazz.
That is such a great name.
Yeah.
That is such a perfect name. I don't know how, or why they came to conclusion on this title, but it perfectly fits the idea of a bunch of just insane people attempting to make jazz music.
I actually read about it. They call it Welfare Jazz because they're not making money off of their music. It's like they're playing music for free. Welcome to the first review of the year, everybody. I hope you guys like it. Talking about Viagra Boys today. Viagra Boys, Swedish post-punk band from Stockholm Syndrome. Lead singer Sebastian Murphy. He grew up in San Francisco and has called Sweden, or Stockholm specifically, his home for the past decade or so. And he formed this band back in 2015 with a bunch of members from other punk bands and hardcore bands in the area. Back in 2018, they released their debut album, Streetworms, which has a really scary cover art.
Which me and Jonathan reviewed last year. We reviewed the deluxe version with a couple bonus tracks to it. I thought while their songwriting was widespread, I like their topics, whether it's the track Worms, where they're talking about how it doesn't matter when we die because those same worms that eat you are going to eat me too, and it doesn't matter, we're going to be equal. Death, the coffin's the great equalizer, the grave's the great equalizer. Sports, where they're so absurd and gelatinous and crazy that you don't understand how a band from Sweden can be this strange. It's almost like an American backroads track, like Trailer Park Trash style track. The frontman gives off that persona. Sebastian gives off that persona. They put out the EP Common Sense in last year, which has some great tracks like Sentinel Island, where a missionary comes to this little village and introduces them to things like drugs and violence and religion, and they just kill them because they don't want anything to do with that. But this new album, I was surprised when we heard the single Ain't Nice, because I thought it was the most solid track they put out to date, blending elements of their saxophone in with their more rough around the edge post-punk with elements of psychedelia and alternative music being blended into this really perfect display, and the character being fronted by Sebastian of this guy who's half-assingly wanting to settle down, but more as just a way to have a place to put all of his shit, I think is very fun. And that's kind of the main theme of this album, is settling down in the various ways people don't want to settle down. On Toad, Sebastian is straight up rejecting the idea of settling down. Having a woman control him is not allowed. He wants to be a free man. Well, at the end, To the Country and Spite Ourselves is the final point where Sebastian does settle down. He does finally grow to the idea of going out of the country, getting a piece of land, and then In Spite of Ourselves, a cover of a John Prine song, leads them and his partner to finally end up having a happy life, settling down and finding some peace in this kind of normal bullshit life.
Yeah, I really like some of the other themes on this album. At least what I got from it was the theme of toxic masculinity and how that runs so rampant within the punk scene. In Viagra Boys' world, I guess they're very much so satirizing that and making fun of toxic masculinity, especially in tracks like you mentioned Ain't Nice and Toad, where he's talking about how women are less than him and he's just being a total Kyle about it. The dude in Ain't Nice probably punches holes in the drywall and drinks Monster.
It reminds me of the similar concept of bravado, weirdly enough, to Kieran J. Callahan. That same, just strange for strange sake. It's he's pretending to be something that's just most flashy and kind of disgustingly masculine performance of himself to kind of break away the barriers, in a sense.
Yeah, really, it's very much so a satire of that toxic masculinity. We've got some really, really great tracks in here that don't really have anything to do with anything. Girls and Boys is just a really fun and hyper track where he's imitating different people and animals, and I don't know.
His relationship with boys who always want him out on the town, girls, how they just try to control him, shrimp, blah, 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 blah. I think there's something about dogs in there. There's a theme of dogs and shrimp through all the Viagra Boys catalog. We had the Best in Show track on Streetworms. So there's a sequel on this that leads into Secret Canine Agent, which is literally about a dog trained by the CIA. Doesn't have anything to do with the rest of this album.
No.
But I'm glad it's here.
Yes. Yes.
It's a nice random detour along with Creatures, talking about these people that live underwater and they trade copper and they just exist. I don't know. They're like sea people.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you leave sea people under your sink.
Those are sea monkeys.
Oh,
if you let them grow for too long. Notice when
sea
you
people,
had
I
sea
think
monkeys.
it's from South Park.
Oh, yeah, it is. Notice when you had sea monkeys, you never saw them after like a couple of months.
That's why they're trading copper.
What happened?
I have a theory Sebastian Murphy is just a giant sea person.
I think he is.
He just grew really big.
He's like one of those pills, you know, like the little colored pills that you put in the water and they grow into like a sponge thing. That's, yeah.
I think you hear about all these reptilians taking charge. I think we should really be worried about the sea people conspiracy.
Sponge people. I feel like the sea people, while that was taken pretty literally within the context of the track, I think it also really plays in with the notion of being poor and being like that lower class citizen,
and almost being like a completely different entity.
Yeah. It's like Creatures are like the poor people, like they're looked upon like they are a lower class of people, or like they are subhuman. This also goes into In Spite of Ourselves. Like that is some of the, I guess, like most endearing poor like white American music that you can get to is this John Prine song.
It's coming out of Sweden.
Basically, yeah, like this In Spite of Ourselves song like reminds me of like people that are just below the poverty line and they only have each other. Like they do everything for the sake of one another, and in spite of all their different like quirks and weird things that they do to drive each other crazy, like they still love each other and they still see themselves like coming out on top at the end of the day. But the way that Viagra Boys take that song is just breathtaking. It's such a great ending to this record. It creates a whole different background and a whole different feel for what this song like was when John Prine covered it, and they made it something completely their own. It feels almost like lumbering and
warped,
hostile and warped. Yeah, it's really strange.
The lyrics fit all the quirks of Viagra Boys, because I don't know much about John Prine.
Without ever writing it, though, they did it word for word.
Yeah, like I don't know much about John Prine, and then you told me it was a cover, and I didn't know that at first. But it feels like an original from them. War movies make her horny. That's such a like a Viagra Boys style, just like absurd, just kind of violent line that fits really well into their music. And I think it just blends. Like I think this song fits more of their characteristics than John Prine, which is weird.
Yeah, I think they really like channeled the spirit of John Prine really well here, and the spirit of that song, even just like as small of a change as creating like. In John Prine's version, it's just like an acoustic guitar playing, it's a major key song. But underneath of it all, when Viagra Boys do it, they use a minor key backtrack, and it makes all the difference. It feels so desolate and desperate. It feels like they know that they're not going to get out, but they're still going to try anyway. It's a very sad track.
The instrumentation of this album kind of flows from genre to genre. It's mostly post-punk, but it has those alternative edges, and those country edges, especially on In Spite of Ourselves. But I like how it just warps. I love how even on a track like In Spite of Ourselves, we'll still get some like an atmospheric edge to it. I also like how the synths and their saxophone kind of add this element of brassness to the album. There's like that really fits that up in your face nature that really works, because there's always like an end that surprises you around these corners, which I really like nothing's really static. I think if you did a song like In Spite of Yourselves, you could have done a very like bare bones cover, and I think that didn't really fit the sound that they were going for in comparison to the rest of the album, so they added that edge to it, which made it really nice. Comparing this to Streetworms, it follows itself through. There's still those weird detours like on Girls and Boys, Creatures, Secret Canine Agent, but I think they fit well into this one narrative, and in some aspects they fit well into the canon of Viagra Boys. Throughout things they've talked about, whether it's been Shrimp or having that Shrimp Sessions EP in the past or whatever it was, and Dogs like Best in Show on the last album, I think everything kind of ties together in their almost weird universe of sorts. And I think that's why I like this album the most. It's just it fits to all the character strengths that they've had before, and there's nothing that really takes you away. I think it's the right amount of length, and I think In Spite of Yourself just literally leaves you fulfilled with the narrative and the songs and the track layout. Yeah, I just think this is a really fantastic album. I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, I was really satisfied with the way that this whole thing played out from the different tracks they did. They had that Coldplay Yellow cover, right, at the second track on there. I mean, they just like to mess around, in all honesty, while still being like a great satire. They have a direct target. You know who they're targeting. They're not going to get confused for being like toxic in and of themselves. They got some really, really great tracks on here, and then some really great detours as well. Like you said, we didn't even mention This Old Dog, this like weird poem that they recite in the middle of the album. I love the different like detours and how silly they can be, but also like how serious, and talk about pretty heavy-handed political topics on here. And then, like I said, In Spite of Ourselves just ties everything up with such a nice bow. I really liked this album. It was very solid.
And that is it. Until next time, guys, if you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can find us at Anthony and Todd. You can find us Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play Podcasts by searching Anthony and Todd Show on your favorite podcast service. And you can find us Patreon, patreon.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. Until next time, guys, I've been Vincent.
I'm Trevor.
And see ya, boyos.
Bye, everybody.